Hey, it's Luke from LT Gaming, and today we're taking a look at Battleship Command, a new first-person naval sim from Bracer and MicroProse where you take command of a Scharnhorst-class battleship and try to survive the very unfriendly waters of World War II. Now, when I did this review last night, I played for a number of hours and I was drinking whiskey and rum, so hopefully I get it right. This is our Should You Buy series where we play the game, give you our honest first impressions, and try to help you work out whether it's worth your money, your time, and in this case, whether you're ready to take 30,000 tons of German steel into the Atlantic. Before we jump in, if you enjoy naval sims, war games, strategy games, or messing around with battleships, then do hit the like button. It massively helps the channel and keeps the algorithm from torpedoing us below the waterline. So Battleship Command is a first-person naval simulation where you take command of a 30,000-ton Scharnhorst-class battleship. The big selling point here is that this is not just a detached map-based naval game where you click icons around from above. You actually walk around the ship, move between stations, look out across the ocean, use binoculars, interact with systems, and take direct control of key areas like navigation, gunnery, radar, and damage control. The game is built around that fantasy of not just commanding a battleship, but actually being there on the ship, which is absolutely fantastic. That first-person element is a massive part of the appeal for me with this one. I know a lot of people like third-person cameras in these kinds of games, and I get why. It gives you more awareness, it's easier to frame the action, and it can look more cinematic. But for me, first person has always been where the immersion really lives. Standing on the deck, looking out across the sea, watching the sun rise, then spotting contacts through binoculars and hearing those guns open up. This is where Battleship Command starts to feel genuinely special. In terms of structure, the game currently gives you tutorials, single missions, scenarios, a quick mission option, and an editor. You're hunting convoys and engaging enemy ships while managing your fleet and trying to make good use of the Scharnhorst speed, firepower, and supporting systems. There's also dynamic weather, a day-night cycle, and multiple naval theatres including the Atlantic, Arctic, and Mediterranean. So I've got to say, the ambition is clearly there, and you can see the bones of a really interesting naval sim forming around the first-person command experience. But, and this is a big but, I mean, that doesn't sound very correct, but anyway, let's go with it. This is also very much bare bones early access. So it's a big bare but. Let's move on quickly. But I do think, on a serious note, I need to be honest about that because early access fatigue is becoming a real thing even in myself. I went through my library recently and it was genuinely shocking how many games I own that are still unfinished, abandoned, or have quietly faded into the fog. And look, I'm not saying that happens here, and MicroProse do have a history of backing interesting niche strategy and simulation games. But Battleship Command at launch is far from being a finished package. It's more of a strong foundation, a proof of concept, and a game we are definitely going to need to revisit as development continues. Now, the best thing about Battleship Command is easily the atmosphere. The Scharnhorst-class battleship is beautifully modelled, and I got a lot of enjoyment simply walking around, looking out across the ocean, watching the lighting change, and just soaking in the scale of this thing. There's something really cool about being on board a massive warship, moving between stations and feeling like you're part of this huge machine. One of my favourite little moments was honestly just watching the sunrise and spotting my recon plane through the binoculars. That may sound small, but in a sim like this, these small immersive moments are often what really sell the experience. It also deserves credit for being surprisingly approachable. This is not one of those sims where you launch it, stare at a wall of unexplained dials, and immediately start questioning your life choices. You can automate certain systems, including areas like gunnery, and that makes the game much easier to get into. After recently spending time with something like modern naval warfare, which can be extremely cool but also very intimidating, Battleship Command felt much easier to understand, and overall more enjoyable. The options are simple, but they worked for me. I always found the things I wanted, like movement speed, mouse turning speed, and automation settings. And the map is clean and intuitive enough that I wasn't fighting the interface the whole time. And then when the action kicks off, it can be genuinely exciting. The sound effects, smoke, shell impacts, and general spectacle of naval combat is really fun. The recon plane is also just simply awesome, and it adds a lot to that feeling of commanding a larger operation rather than just sailing around waiting to visually bump into something. The dynamic weather system is also a nice touch for an indie game, and visually I think this game looks really good for what it is. Performance was rock solid for me, the ship itself looks great, and the damage model already seems interesting enough to suggest there is a proper simulation layer developing underneath the spectacle. I also think the Scharnhorst was an interesting choice because you're commanding a fast, powerful surface raider that fits the convoy hunting gameplay loop really well. This gives the game a bit more character, and I appreciated that angle. Just a quick interlude to say most of you who watch the channel are not subscribed.
So make sure to go down below and hit that subscribe button because it helps smaller channels like us grow really quickly, and both me and Tom really appreciate it.
Now let's jump into the bad stuff, and the obvious issue is content. This is very early access, and at the moment I would estimate there's maybe around 10 hours of structured mission content, depending on how you play and how much you replay things. There is a quick mission option and also an included editor, so there are ways to extend your time with it, especially if you enjoy tinkering with scenarios. But if you're coming in expecting a full campaign, a long progression structure, or a really fleshed out naval war experience, this is not what this is right now. The roadmap does mention a campaign as a longer term goal, but that seemed a bit vague and I'd like a few more details around that. I also did run into a few rough edges, so once my convoy just stopped I could never work out how to get it moving again. Did I make the mistake? Was it a bug? I just never found out really. And then I did sink a number of ships during my playtime, but none of this ever registered in the stats at the end of the game, which was a bit disappointing. There's also a few limitations around presentation and interaction here. The graphical options felt a bit limited, although to be fair that didn't really affect my actual game time because performance was solid and the game overall looks pretty good. I would also like more access to the ship. What is there is fun and walking around is a big part of the appeal, but because that first person immersion is such a strong hook, I naturally wanted even more of it. More accessible spaces, more little details, and more reasons to physically move around the ship. That would help deepen the fantasy even more. And finally, while the combat is exciting, there are times where once the engagement starts, you can feel a bit more like a spectator than a person truly driving the action. Now that is partly because Battleship Command lets you automate systems, and I actually like that accessibility. But it does mean the game is walking a delicate line between command sim and cinematic observation. So should you buy Battleship Command? This is one of those games where my heart and my head are slightly arguing with each other, if I'm honest. My heart says yes, because there are moments here that are genuinely wonderful if you are a naval sim fan. Walking around the Scharnhorst, watching the sea, using the binoculars, launching into combat, hearing the guns fire and feeling the scale of the ship, that stuff absolutely worked on me. But my head says this is probably a wait for the majority of players right now. Definitely not because the game is bad, I actually think the core is really promising, but because it is very clearly early access and fairly bare bones early access at that. If you're tired of buying promising games and then waiting months or years for the full experience to arrive, I completely understand being cautious here. There is a roadmap, but that's easy to put together. I really would want some more specific dates on when we're going to get this stuff. For me, price is going to matter a lot here. I did not have pricing information when recording this, but for me, Battleship Command really needs to come in around that £15 or €20 mark to feel like a comfortable buy in its current state. So my final take is this: Battleship Command is absolutely one to watch. There's something really compelling here for the right type of player who loves naval sims. But for most players, this is probably a wishlist and wait situation until we see how quickly the game expands and how the campaign develops. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. I've been Luke from LT Gaming, and I'll see you out there on the seas.